Today we are at the Bismarck Art Gallery and Association,
Yes.
B-A-G-A, visiting Baga with my longtime friend. I say that from the heart, Walter Piehl Jr.
You bet.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. I don't know if your viewers know. I've 5 weeks ago had double bypass and a valve replacement, so I'm real happy to be here today.
You know, you said something when you were inducted in 2019 that is really a bit of irony today. You said when you got up to that podium, Walter, to accept your honor of being inducted, you said, "Today my heart is filled with good medicine," and that's a quote by Charlie Russell, I believe, correct? One of your favorite artists. How ironic is it that you are actually filled with heart medicine today?
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Considering I really had no symptoms and it was just a fluke that turned up that they said, you know, this is something you should take care of. So I did.
Yeah, and we tried to do this back in March when I know during the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame annual meting, you had a display, you and Doug had a display at Minot State University at the Walter Piehl
Gallery. That's part of the Northwest Art Center on campus.
Named after your father.
Well, it's named after me.
It is.
Because I taught there for 48 years.
Wow. Teaching art. We're going to get into that here in just a bit. Yeah. What were the steps that led you to Minot State University? Where were you born? Where did you go to school? And how did you end up teaching there for 4 decades?
Man. Well, my hometown, my wife Becky, we're both from Marion, North Dakota, south of Jamestown, south and east a bit. And I grew up in a hard scrabble place. My dad, Walter Piehl Sr., was a horse buyer after the Second World War, buying horses that were being sent to slaughter. He bought them off the places, and we always had tons of horses around. He partnered up with what would it have been? It would have been in the late 50s with Olafberg and Fort Ransom, North Dakota, who had been buying horses the same way and had been furnishing horses to rodeos. And so my dad, we tried a bunch of our horses, and they just partnered up, and they furnished stock to rodeos in that part of the country. And then my dad bought a string of bucking bulls from out of West Fargo, Kim, is it Ludke? They had the string of bulls, and so then my dad and Olaf had bulls and horses, and then my dad started producing rodeos as well. So, you know, I was just part of the whole deal. And one day an announcer didn't show up in Binford, and I was in college at the time, and he said, the announcer's not going to show. He said, you been to college, you take over. So, so I started, that's how I did it.
Okay.
And I was going into teaching. So I made announcing my part of the rodeo for many years, and if I wasn't announcing, I was flanking bulls and flanking horses. So it was a family deal.
Okay.
We did it mostly in the eastern part of the state, some in Minnesota, some in South Dakota. We made it out as far as Richardton, produced a rodeo there too. But that's how I really got into it, through the family. Like that, and our place was a lot of farmland plus a lot of cattle and horses. My dad was also a cattle dealer for dairy cattle and beef cattle. He bought and sold. He was a trader. He loved.
How was your relationship with your father? The apple didn't fall far from the tree. I think you must have admired
my relationship. You know, we didn't. We weren't a warm and fuzzy father and son.
Okay.
He told me where to go to cut hay, and then he told me where to go after I cut hay and where to go do this. We didn't talk a lot about anything but work.
Okay.
But I think we got along fine. I think he respected that I decided to go to college because I really wanted to get out of the haystack for a while. And he respected my choice going into teaching. I think he would have liked to have seen me come back to the place, but I put too many years out in that wind, and I just decided, no, I'm going to stay in teaching. I went on to college and got a master's degree, and I was at the University of Minnesota for a year when I got a chance at a job in Minot State. So that was in 1970, and I was there, retired in 2017. I had been teaching part-time for 10 years there. But.
Okay, now through all of that, Walter, when did you discover that, hey, I can paint, I love to paint, and how did you kick that rock away from the wagon wheel and get that wagon to start rolling?
I didn't know I could paint. I knew I could draw. As a kid, we had no electricity, just a battery and a wind charger, and as a little kid, I drew a lot because radio and little lantern at night, and so I drew for entertainment. I mean, I filled up tablets and tablets full of cowboys and Indians and ranching, and during the Second World War, tanks and airplanes. I had a couple uncles in the war. So I drew all my life, and when it was time to go to college, I had no idea what I was going to go into, but I had a friend that went to Concordia, and he said they have a very good art department at Concordia. He said you should look into it. My folks, of course, liked it because it was a church school. Okay. They didn't know that there was a lot of unchurch things that went on there, probably, but you know, I went there and enjoyed myself and learned how little I knew about it. And it wasn't until I got to UND, I didn't feel, I was so far behind everybody else. I'd never had an art class before in my life. I just went there as a, you know, prairie dog off the place who could draw a little bit. And I went there at Concordia with kids who were brought in from Baltimore and from St. Paul, all over the United States, some even from Europe, who'd had art their entire lives. They were at a college and above level. I went in there like an 8th grader. So it was, the only thing that kept me there was fear of the haystack.
Fear of the haystack, explain that.
Well, if I didn't go to college, where was I going to go? I was going back up on top of the haystack with a hired man trying to cover me up with a big buckload of hay.
Okay.
So I stayed with it. But after I graduated, I had a teaching degree, didn't get a job, and I really didn't feel complete as an artist, so I went to UND. My wife and I got married in '64. She got a job at the medical school, and I was in the master's program at the University of North Dakota. And after, I think it was the first semester, I was in a painting class, and had a teacher, they called him Dakota Dave, but he was hardly Dakota. Anyway, he said, I hear you on weekends, they tell me you go off and rodeo. And I said, yeah, the family's in the rodeo business, and so during the good weather, we're out there outdoor rodeo. He said, well, why don't you paint the rodeo and that subject? And I said, well, I didn't think appropriate because at Concordia, they thought, you know, anything that was too glamorous, too full of, I don't know, it was just kind of not the style that was taught at Concordia. It was a very calm, very stylistic, beautiful. Cy Running was the head of the department and a teacher. He was a wonderful, wonderful teacher. But I really, you know, I was learning it all. And so I said, I just didn't really think rodeo was appropriate. And he said, you know, painting the rodeo, anything's appropriate to an artist. You can make it work for you. He said it would be far better for you to paint the rodeo than to continue painting those lame and insipid landscapes. I had enough college, I knew what lame and insipid meant.
Okay. So, now, let's move on to teaching art. Does you know, just a layman, I don't know a lot about painting, and things, but on the outside looking in, is there something internal that is required to portray something externally? Or how do you go about teaching art? Well, I think people have a interest in it, a proclivity for it. They might have some ability, just like with music. Some people have a gift of the ear, some people have a gift of the voice, some people have a gift of musical ability, and any other talent, a so-called talent or ability, I like to call it. And most people that are in art departments have had some encouragement as drawers, as artists,
And today it's not uncommon, even in small schools, to have some art programs over the television and art taught a little bit. So they come to college and we teach them design, we teach them how to draw, we try to teach them printmaking, we teach them to be all-around artists. Now the graphic designers are very important, and videographers are very important. It all ties in with art and graphic design. So they have some ability, and we try to tap into that and their energy and have some wonderful students. In fact, Lene Hansen here, the director of the Bismarck Art Gallery Association, was a former student of mine at Minot State back in the day. I don't know how many decades ago, really. But she was a great student. She had a great career here in Bismarck, I think, working for North Dakota Safety Council, something like that. And now she took over as the director of the gallery here.
You mentioned music, and there's some great musicians who are also painters. Ron Wood with the Rolling Stones, Rick Allen with Def Leppard, Paul Stanley from the band Kiss, John Mellencamp, the liaison between music and...
John Lennon was a great artist.
John Lennon.
So was Paul McCartney. They were both art students. And then, of course, now Bob Dylan is really making a name for himself as a painter. So, yeah, there's a lot of crossover talent there.
Okay. Now, when you're painting something like this, first of all, explain, what are we looking at? What is this?
This looks to me like it's a bareback horse that's sun fishing, and the rider is coming off him in a very dramatic kind of fashion.
Okay, and it looks like there's a lot happening there. There's a lot of energy going on. Do you get wore out when you're painting something like this? I mean, expressing yourself in this manner, or is it relaxing
I
for
get
you?
invigorated.
Really?
I start out, you'll see some lines in here that are blue chalk. I do the chalk drawing first to try to arrive at an image, and if I don't like what I'm doing, I can just take a wet cloth and wipe it off. Then after that, I do a preliminary drawing, which may conform to the chalk, or it might independently exist outside of what the chalk image was. Then I start putting on paint, and it's a joy to put on the paint and to try to get, I follow what the abstract expressionists out of New York, the School of Action Painting, where they felt that the way you put the paint on helps energize the painting. If the viewer can have an idea that the paint was put on with energy, it's going to give energy to the painting. So you can see here, the paint in some places was slapped on and drug across and splattered and dripped. So there's energy. It's fluid.
How long does it take to create something like this?
Well, it takes an hour, 2 hours to make a mess, and then you got to decide what to get rid of and what to keep. That's what takes the time.
So can you start a painting like this and then take a couple days off and come back to it?
That's the best thing to do, because you come back and you say, oh,
renewed energy.
That's not working. You can see places where I've painted out part of the images, covered it up with white paint and repainted it. And it also goes back to a school of art that originated in Italy, a school of art from the early 1900s. They were called the Futurists. And they believed in, well, they practiced a style of art that was like Cubism, like Picasso is famous for. But they believed that instead of an object sitting still, you should show an image of it moving, and it should be of tanks, it should be of airplanes, it should be of horses and races. And it showed all of these dramatic movement of objects and animals and people, but in the style of art like Cubism, which does not really fit what I'm trying to do, because my subject matter is much more curvilinear, and it's not angular.
What was that word?
Curvilinear.
Curvilinear.
Look at all the curves and the lines and the curvilinear stuff.
Curvilinear, that's a new word I learned today.
Yeah, well, and it's a good word.
It's a great word.
Yeah.
It's a $7 word, I think.
Could be a 7-cent word. But anyway, and that's what my stuff is about.
Okay, you've got the dog and pony show going on here. You've had it in Grand Forks, you had it in Minot. How long is your art going to be on display here in Bismarck?
It'll be up till the end of June.
End of June, okay.
Yep.
And explain why the name Dog and Pony Show.
Well, Doug's he does these wonderful little dog sculptures.
Yep.
Doug was a teacher at Minot State. He was a student of mine at Minot State. He went on to teach, I think, in Hazen for a while, at Wahpeton for a while, got a master's degree, and he came back and taught at Minot State. So he was a colleague and a friend and a former student. And he does these dog sculptures, and now he's got these wonderful paintings based on cowboy bandanas. He calls them the Bandanarama.
Bandanarama.
Paintings.
Wow.
And other things that are here. The other artist, Ned Krause, the ceramic artist who has wall bowls and vessels, wonderful pieces. He's from Michigan, but he spent some time in Minot substitute teaching while another faculty member was on leave. So Doug and I had the first show 20 years ago in Grand Forks, and it was called the Dog and Pony Show for obvious reasons. And at some point or another, the inside joke is that I made a statement to Ned that I was a real artist and he was just a mud pie maker. And that got to be the inside joke, and so that's how the name of this show came about. Doug and Walter, the Dog and Pony Show with Doug and Walter and Ned, the real artist.
Be sure to stop by the Bismarck Art Gallery Association on Front Avenue in Bismarck before the end of June and see Walter and Doug and everybody's art on display here. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Walter, but you have been many things and you have done many things well, from rodeo to announcing to your art to teaching to a husband and father and things. Who are you, though? Who is Walter Piehl Jr.?
I'm just a kid from Marion, North Dakota. That's all. Who wanted to see a little bit more than the haystack, and I have, and I've enjoyed it all. And one of the greatest pleasures I had was being connected with rodeo, and loved the history of the West, all of it, and I'm just still reveling in the rodeo part of the West, even though I do lots of other Western Americana subjects. But rodeo has been my mainstay for 50, 60 years of painting.
Before we turn you loose, first of all, let me mention that this won't be the last time that we visit. This river runs pretty deep, and we just skipped a rock across the surface as far as I'm concerned, and we want to dig a little deeper as time goes on. But before we turn you loose today, Walter, is there any information that you would like to share with our viewers? Perhaps a question that I didn't ask, or did we pretty much cover what you envisioned for this conversation today?
Well, when you said breaks my heart when we talked about a heart and a Charlie Russell saying, I wanted to mention, people think, why doesn't he, in fact, I remember people in Minot say, why don't you just paint horses? You know, why don't you just paint horses that look like horses? Well, because I don't want to. I want to do more. And they think, well, don't you like what Charlie Russell did? I love what Charlie Russell did. Charlie Russell is my favorite artist of all time, but he did it. I want to do something unique, something different, something that's unique to me. And Charlie Russell was one of the greatest storytellers, both in his artwork and in his written. Rawhide Rollins tales and his letters, illustrated letters. I mean, if you study Charlie Russell, you can have nothing but the utmost respect for the communication skills and the art skills of this guy. I love his work, but I don't want to copy him. I'm not interested in doing what everybody else is doing. I want to bring something unique to it, because that's what contemporary art is, what I taught, and it's what I was taught, and it's the way I roll right now.
I first learned of Walter Piehl Jr. on August 1st, 1998. Do you know what you did that day?
No.
You introduced Harold Schaefer, who accepted the honor of Louis L'Amour being inducted into the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame. You were at the podium.
Yeah.
And a bit of irony, we began filming Dakota Cowboy 1 year ago today that we're doing this interview, and that first interview was one of my favorite people, Joe Wiegand, who portrays Theodore Roosevelt. And I can say exactly 1 year later, I interviewed another one of my favorite people, Walter Piehl Jr. Thank you so much for your time. Congratulations
Yeah,
for all your
you bet.
accomplishments, and we will do this again, okay?
Very good. Appreciate
Alrighty.
it, Bill. Thank you.
We will be right back on Dakota Cowboy here on Beck TV, presented by Dakota Community Bank and Trust.